Everyone is talking about million-dollar HDBs. Every week there seems to be another headline, another record broken. But let me ask you something. What if that's no longer the most important story in the HDB market? Because while everyone is focused on the top 1% of transactions, there's something happening underneath the surface that is more crucial that I think many HDB owners are completely missing. And honestly, as someone who's on the ground speaking to buyers and sellers every single week, I'm already starting to see and feel the effects of it. So in today's episode, I want to share what I believe the government has been quietly doing behind the scenes over the last few years. And if you're a HDB owner today, this might be something you want to pay attention to. Because what happens next could affect the value of your home and your plans moving forward. Before we begin, do help me to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. I genuinely appreciate the support because I make a lot of effort putting all of these market updates together and also sharing what's really happening on the ground. Now, let me ask you a question. Why do you think the government introduced the 15-month wait-out period back in 2022? Most people know the rule exists, but very few people stop to think about why it was introduced in the first place. Back then, HDB prices were moving very aggressively. A lot of the private property owners were selling their condos or landed homes and moving into resale HDBs. Because many of them were sitting on substantial cash proceeds, they didn't need to take loans. In fact, some didn't even care about valuation because they were paying fully in cash. I remember we were helping a few clients sell their executive apartments and executive mansionettes during that period of time. Coincidentally, every single buyer who bought from us happened to be a former private property owner. Some of them had sold their landed homes, some had sold their condos. And because they were right sizing and mostly using full cash payment, cash over valuation became increasingly common. Prices started moving up very quickly. And that's exactly why the government stepped in with the 15-month wait-out period. And here's where things start to get a bit more interesting. If the government's long-term intention is to eventually relax or remove this rule completely, wouldn't they first need to make sure that the HDB market is stable? Because if prices are already rising rapidly and private property owners are suddenly allowed back into the market immediately, what do you think will happen? Chances are, prices will run even faster. And that's why I believe what we're saying today is not random. I think we're starting to see the results of a much bigger effort to stabilize the HDB market. So let's take a look at the numbers. In 2021, HDB resale prices increased by 12%. In 2022, by another 10% growth. And then in 2023, 4.9%, and then in 2024, it accelerated again at 9.7%. But here's the most important part. In 2025, HDB resale prices grew the slowest by only 2.9%. And that's the slowest annual growth we've seen in about 5 to 6 years' times over here. And if we zoom out in the quarterly numbers, the slowdown becomes even more obvious. The first quarter at 1.6%, second quarter at 0.9%, and the third quarter 0.4% before the final quarter in 2025, growth was sitting at 0%. So think about that for a moment. Despite all of the headlines about million-dollar HDBs, despite all the record high transactions happening, the overall HDB market still ended the year with zero growth in the final quarter. In fact, in 2025 alone, recorded $1,594 million HDB transactions, the highest number ever recorded in a single year. And that's more than a 50% increase compared to the previous year. So what does that tell us? It tells us that while the top few percent of HDB owners are hitting record high, the broader market is actually behaving very differently. If almost $1,600 million transactions still couldn't pull the overall market higher, that already tells us something important about the underlying demand. Then came another milestone in 2026, where we officially see the HDB Resale Price Index decline by 0.1%. Now, I know some people may be looking at this number and saying, Yvette, minus 0.1% is nothing. And I agree. This number alone is not the key point. The key is the direction we're heading towards. Markets don't move from double-digit growth to declining prices overnight. They slow down first before stagnating, and that's exactly what we've been seeing over the past couple of years. So at the same time, we are also seeing another major development, and that is supply. From 2025 to 2027, the government has committed to launching around 55,000 BTO flats. And recently, there have already been indications that more supply may be introduced if necessary. Now, put yourself in the shoes of a resale buyer today. If initially you are considering to buy a resale HDB, and suddenly you hear that there are more BTO launches happening, more choices available, and potentially better chances at securing a flat, would you rush into the resale market immediately? Probably not. You might decide to wait. You might decide to explore your options, and when buyers become less urgent, demand naturally softens. And this is one reason why many sellers today are experiencing plenty of viewings but very few offers, or offers coming in lower than expected, or in some cases, very little inquiry altogether. But that's only one side of the equation. The second wave of supply comes from MOP flats. Between 2021 and 2025, the government delivered approximately 100,000 homes. And these homes will eventually complete their minimum occupation period, their MOP, and enter the resale market in a couple of years' time. And we're already starting to see that happen. In 2026 alone, more than 13,000 flats are expected to reach MOP. And if you zoom in even further, in certain locations, competition could become particularly intense. Areas such as your Dawson, your Bidadari, Tampines, and also Punggol North Shore are expected to see a significant number of flats entering the resale market over the coming years. Now, here's the more interesting part. When government agencies talk about increasing supply and more MOP flats entering the market, they often mention one key objective: providing more housing options and helping to stabilize the resale prices. Because what's the intention of HDB at the end of the day? It is to make the prices affordable for the masses. And if you connect that back to the earlier discussion on the 15-month way out period, you begin to connect the dots and see a possible bigger picture. Could it be that the government is preparing the market for a future where that restriction is no longer necessary? I don't know exactly when that will happen. Nobody does. But what we do know is that the conditions needed for such a move are gradually being created. More BTO supply, more MOP supply, slower price growth, and now even the first price decline in years. When you put all of these pieces together, it paints a very different picture from the headlines we usually see. So if you are a HDB owner today, the question I want to leave you is this. With tens of thousands of new flats entering the market over the next few years, with more BTO launches, and with resale prices already showing signs of flattening, do you think your property's valuation is likely to become easier or harder to maintain moving forward? That's not a question for me to answer. That's a question for you to think about. Because if we look back at history, what we're seeing today actually feels very familiar. The last major HDB peak happened around 2013 over here. Following that, the government introduced multiple cooling measures, prices eventually stabilized, and the market entered a prolonged period of stagnation, which from here, you actually see that the prices decline before stagnating over the years. Let me show you some real case studies from the last peak. For example, in Punggol Central, near MRT, location is good. At the last peak, prices reached at up to 592,000. Then we hit a stagnation, resulting in 0 transactions at all in 2013 over here. And the next transaction in 2014, only 440,000 on from there. That is a massive 150k drop. This is not just in Punggol, but across different areas such as Bukit Batok over here, you see the same thing. The last peak at 765,000, and from there, it has never crossed 700,000, of course, until COVID period. Then also in Tampines area, the same thing. 2013, the highest peak transacted at 509,000, 505,000. You see no transaction for here in 2014, and then the next transaction in 2015, what happened? It was only at 520, and you see in the coming years, all the way up to 2018, it has stagnated at that same price range. From the last peak, back to the chart, the drop could range from 50,000 all the way to 150,000. Back then, many owners couldn't sell and take out any cash at all, because in such cases, they might as well stay put if they cannot take out any cash. Because they have already went into negative sale, number one, price dropped. And number two, their CPF accrued interest snowballed over the years. So not being able to take out cash is just one thing. Losing money, like letting your CPF disappear into thin air, is actually very, very scary. So today, over here, are we seeing something similar again? Many signs again are already showing. More policy intervention, more supply, slower growth, and then now the first negative movement in years. Does that mean prices are going to crash? No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that the market moving forward may look very different from the market we've enjoyed over the last few years. And this could really affect your next step if you are a HDB owner today. And it's probably a good time to start planning ahead early instead of just assuming prices will continue rising indefinitely. If you are unsure what this means for your own property, whether you should hold on, upgrade, downgrade, or simply understand where your home stands in today's market, feel free to reach out to me. I'll be happy to review your situation and help you understand your available options for the next step. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.